Monster Hunter Wilds has sold over 10 million copies, and you can verify this, like, this is real. Coming from their investor relations report, Monster Hunter Wilds, 10 million copies sold. It must be a damn great game. So let's go ahead and boot up Monster Hunter Wilds. What the fuck? We have to compile shaders, okay. If we compile shaders, the game is gonna run really smoothly, so I'll go ahead and wait this out. It's done. Dude, that took over 6 minutes. Dude, I remember when we were playing on hard drives and it only took like a minute or two to load a game, but now we're taking 6 minutes to load a game. Apparently it's worth it because these shader compilations should make the game run very smoothly on my system, so it should all be worth it, guys. Bro. This game looks awful. What the f? They released this game? Look how like blocky it is, and this looks like shit. And it also looks like the entire world is like crawling. It has to be the game settings we're running on. Okay, let's go into this. Let's see. We're at 1080p. We're at medium settings. Oh, we got DLSS performance on? Wait, so this is rendering from 540p to 1080p? Oh, let's just turn that off. We're getting like 40 FPS. Mid 40s? Wait, so when I start fighting, then I'm only getting in the 30s, maybe 40 on medium settings on a new graphics card. Oh shit, guys, it's the frame rate. It's not me. I swear. Am I crazy too? But like we're upscaling from 540p, and this game doesn't even look good. By the way, this game was $70. So despite the over 1.3 million players that played on Steam around like the launch of the game 3 months ago, they made the game in this state that just runs like shit. And now the retention for the game has not been very good. You know, Monster Hunter games usually retain a lot of players because there's tons of stuff to do in the game. When you look at the Steam reviews now for Monster Hunter Wilds, it's Monster Hunter Wilds is way too short, too easy, too streamlined, too expensive, $70 for this, by the way, and it runs like trash. Many other people have been saying it has incredibly poor performance, not really a good look, and the overall reviews recently for Monster Hunter Wilds have been switching to overwhelmingly negative. People are very unhappy with the game, and they haven't updated it or changed anything significantly from the launch of the game. So just f you, over 1 million concurrent players at launch, like 10 million copies sold, f you Steam. And it's not that much better on console either. It's still very blurry because they're upscaling like crazy on console as well. When you compare Monster Hunter Wilds to the last gen game, Monster Hunter World, that Capcom released, well, it starts to paint a picture. How did this game get so bad? And how is today's sponsor so damn good? Hey, this is my bed, but something crazy happened. I just received the biggest package from FlexiSpot ever. This is my new bed. And yes, it is beautiful. And the first step for a new high quality bed is to take out the old bed. And things got a little... Oh, I bent it. As you see, a bit of a precarious situation with this bed because there's a lot of fasteners on it that you have to use tools to manually put them on. I know, caveman stuff. Couldn't wait to get this out because FlexiSpot uses joinery technology for a quick 10-minute installation. Look what else they sent. A washable rug. Why did you just put a rug on top of a rug? The rug is not gonna be staying in my room. The rug is super easy to assemble on that pad. Just pick it up and put it back down. You can literally quick release your rug and put it into the washer. Very, very vacuumable, or whatever the heck you wanna call it. I did time it when I built the bed. It only took me 16 minutes, but I didn't even have everything out and I read the instructions wrong and did things incorrectly. So that kinda makes sense, but it's very frustration-free and fast. It looks really nice, as you can tell. It is very quiet and very stable, especially because of that Japanese style rubber wood joinery. And this is just the base configuration, no headboard, no fancy stuff, but there is nightstands, headboards, even raising mattress functions. What's amazing is this bed and rug are both very affordable and quick to ship. Within 1 to 2 days, they're gonna send out your order. If you like this bed, or if you need a bed, FlexiSpot is a great choice. There'll be a link in the top of the description. So thanks for FlexiSpot for sponsoring this section of the video, and let's get back in. Optimization seems so bad nowadays. In Monster Hunter World, on the same GPU, the RTX 4060, I can get it running at max settings at 1440p without any upscaling bullshit, and it's getting about 60 FPS with just like very, very few dips under 60. And you can even drop it to high settings at 1440p native and get like 80 to 90 FPS if you really want to. Monster Hunter World still holds up decently well against Wilds. Wilds doesn't look that much better than the older game that came out 7 years ago. Because you look at things like the vistas, the set pieces that are in Monster Hunter World, look at this environment. It is pretty dense, it looks pretty cool. Really, one of the major flaws with Monster Hunter World graphically was the texture detail, that it's pretty low res. Look at the ground here, look at the character models, they're pretty blurry. But if you uploaded to Wilds, you would think, oh, they would improve that for the new game. Well, they didn't really improve texture detail in Wilds, despite it being 7 years later. The other problem with Monster Hunter World is the geometric detail, so the 3D polygon detail that is in the game. So the world looks kind of flat, and they did improve that in Monster Hunter Wilds. The environment has more geometric 3D detail, but the new game doesn't look that much better than the old game. Yet it struggles to even get 40 FPS at 1080p, not even 1440p. On medium settings. Wilds is so bad that at the recommended settings for the game, they want you to use frame generation from 30 FPS to get you up to 60, which means you're going to use these duplicated frames, these interpolated frames that have visual artifacts in them. They also increase the latency, the responsiveness of your game just to hit 60 FPS. It's going to look, it's going to run, and it's also going to feel like shit. And that's what brings us to the king of optimization. We all know the Doom franchise. It's always been known to run super well, super clean, and the latest installment of the game has just come out. So I'm excited to try this game because they're going to be super well optimized. Well, a bit of a problem there. So the RTX 4060 at 1440p, which is something pretty normal for a Doom game to play at, with upscaling on ultra settings, which in other games is equivalent to like high settings. This game is a weird way to set that up. It's only getting like 60 FPS on the RTX 4060. You could argue this GPU isn't really built for that. I would argue that it should be able to do that in a Doom game, because let's hop over to Doom Eternal. At 1440p ultra settings as well in Doom Eternal, it's getting over 150 FPS on the same graphics card. Native too. We're not upscaling from 1080p like we were in Doom the Dark Ages. And shoot, you can play at 4K native at the same settings on this 4060 and get more frames than we did on Doom the Dark Ages. And just look at the game. Yeah, it doesn't look as good as Dark Ages, but it still looks very, very good, and it's running so much better. And that's something about Doom, is Doom, one of the most fundamental experiences is being able to run at this high frame rate, to feel like you're an absolute beast just ripping through demons the whole time. And for that to be so much harder to achieve without insane upscaling and frame generation doesn't feel the same on the new Doom game. That is only one part of it, because if we look at the PC system requirements, you have to have a ray tracing capable GPU. So Doom games that could typically run on a potato, I've seen people run Doom, like the older ones, on a freaking display adapter for an iPhone. You might argue too, like, hey, turn on frame generation and make up that gap. Yeah, let's just use the technology to work around the shortcomings of the game development here. And well, that doesn't really work on a lower end graphics card. Like an RTX 4060 doesn't have enough VRAM to use frame generation properly in this game. But if you didn't think the poor performance in Doom the Dark Ages was enough, like you really, really want to just get fucked. All right, I put us at high settings at 1080p. Right now we're getting about 60 FPS, which isn't really saying much on the 4060. They want to punish you for trying to purchase and play their game. So they added path tracing to the game. Path tracing is every effect in the game is pretty much ray traced. Not only does it look extremely blurry, it's also only running at 6 FPS. So let's go ahead and turn on some upscaling. Oh, it's already using upscaling. I thought I turned that off. That's not good. We're already upscaling from 540p, that's why it looks so blurry. Yeah, even changing a setting here to try to make it run better, not only does it look awful, but we're still only getting 6 FPS. Look how blurry it looks. Now you could argue with path tracing. It's like, oh, you wouldn't really use it with this specific graphics card. Path tracing is more of a future-proofing feature. So in 10 years, when we can use path tracing kind of consistently on our graphics cards, that people can actually run the current Doom in today. Cool, I guess it has some future proofing, but who the hell is going to use this? Couple hundred of you that got your hands on a $4,000 5090, and that's what you'll be using to path trace Doom. And not only this, but like a side note with Doom the Dark Ages, when I got the game at first, like I bought this game because I wanted to test it, and I got the early access version, which was $100. But then also when I bought the game, all right, let's launch her up. Okay, so I got a crash already. It wouldn't launch on my graphics card. I kept trying to launch it, fail, launch it, fail, launch it, fail. So by paying $100 for early access of this game, you're also an early access tester. You're a beta tester at that point, and it feels the same way with Monster Hunter Wilds. The newest Doom runs like shit, and it requires ray tracing to work on your system. None other Dooms did that in the past. Let's try competitive games. Competitive games always run well, you know what I mean? Let's hop over to Marvel Rivals, an Unreal Engine 5 game that is also a competitive shooter. You know, Unreal Engine 5 is known for how well it runs on your system, so this should run great as well. You know, it doesn't run that bad. At 1080p, if we use medium settings, we can get like 90 FPS or so. That's pretty good on the 4060. And if you up it to 1440p, you're gonna be getting only like 60 FPS at 1440p. So with some upscaling, you can get improved performance and actually be competitive with an RTX 4060 at 1440p, I guess if you want to call it that. Well, what happens if we hop over to a game like Overwatch 2 at medium settings at 1440p? Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, like quadruple the frame rate feels a little bit better on the 4060 at native 1440p. It's a major difference between these competitive titles. So an Unreal Engine 5 competitive game runs a lot more poorly. So I'm in the training range at medium settings. First off, I'm not super happy with how these reflections look, but you know, it's a competitive game. Who cares really about what the game looks that much? You're here to play the game, right? So first off, let's like look over here. We're getting about 120 FPS on medium settings in the game. Let's go ahead and up the settings to high. We went from about 120 and now we're down to about 95 FPS. If you want to up the settings again, we can go to ultra, and now we've all of a sudden about cut our FPS in half. Now a lot can change with these settings, and I want you to look at these two and tell me which one is a higher resolution, which one is sharper. I'm going to put these side by side. What do you think? But a weird phenomenon about Marvel Rivals is it seems like when you turn up the settings in the game, that the game actually looks less sharp and it looks blurrier than it would on the lower settings. Because on the left side here that you're looking at the whole time was medium settings, then on the right side was high settings. Now, what does high settings do in this game? Obviously, this is an Unreal Engine 5 game. It has Nanite and Lumen. Lumen is a real-time lighting technology for global illumination in this case. It used to default to have Lumen reflections on the high preset as well, but they ended up changing that to just having screen space reflections, probably because it's so demanding. The reason why high settings looks worse than I would say medium settings do, at least in some cases, is because Lumen is a software-based ray tracing feature. And ray tracing is extremely demanding because it's casting all of these rays and it's trying to make up a functional image with just those little points in space. It doesn't always look the sharpest thing in the world. The only way we can get ray tracing to look decent in games is by using things like denoising. It can look decent standing still here. And a really weird phenomenon, look at say the shadow on this little like circular big old thing here, I guess. And you see how there's like an ambient occlusion as it goes into that corner? It gets darker. Well, look as I'm going past it here, and it's completely smearing it and breaking it up. And that's because as I'm going past, I'm disoccluding the area, and the denoiser gets completely messed up, and it's temporally accumulating some things that cause ghosting. That's why it looks so rough. And another weird phenomenon with it, Lumen is a software-based ray tracing solution, which means it doesn't actually always cast rays. Go around this corner here. As you see, this doesn't make any sense, but the ambient occlusion that's over there starts to fade in as we're walking by, which is so weird. And it's because Lumen actually takes into account some things that are in your screen space. So Lumen doesn't know what's behind this wall here, this big old gray wall. It doesn't make the ambient occlusion for those objects anymore. It just doesn't exist. Is when we drop down to medium settings in the game, there basically is no ambient occlusion in this game, but you can bake ambient occlusion into your environment and it looks pretty decent, to be honest. Ambient occlusion here, if it was baked in, would be more accurate than what Lumen was representing, despite Lumen also being so intense on your system. And this, for many reasons, makes Lumen completely counterintuitive to what a competitive game would be. Now, Lumen could be used to just enhance the detail in the game for screenshots and stuff, but at a fundamental sense, it is worse for a competitive shooter. Not only does it smear things like this, it's also less sharp, and it runs worse on your system. Now, I don't doubt that over time, Marvel Rivals will start to run a little bit better as hardware improves and maybe some optimizations to Unreal Engine improve as well. But at the same time, right now, it's like, why wouldn't you just use a different method of making the game? You could put all the blame on this to Unreal Engine, that Unreal Engine just runs like shit and stuff. That isn't even necessarily the case. A lot of games can still make Unreal Engine 5 work very, very well, and has a lot of advantages, like it being very mainstream, being accessible to the public, lots of on-store assets that you can purchase and use in your games, very, very widely supported. A lot of people have experience in it, and Unreal Engine 5 makes a lot of sense for people. And that's why you see companies like CD Projekt Red, making The Witcher 4 in Unreal Engine 5, and instead of, improving their Red engine, which they used in Cyberpunk, which was also a very impressive engine as well, they're using Unreal Engine 5 and just improving on it with Witcher 4. But that doesn't mean that a lot of developers don't fall into the trap of Unreal Engine. It has this dynamic environment, it has this real-time lighting system. Well, you could just have the whole game do that for you, and maybe it'll have a performance hit. And that's what gets me so frustrated with a game like Black Myth Wukong. I love Black Myth Wukong, very fun game, I've enjoyed it, but the performance of this game is awful. Like a 4060 struggles to run this game at 1080p, and if you want to run even reasonable graphics cards at 1440p, you're going to be upscaling and using that kind of stuff. They're obviously leaning on upscaling just to get the game to run properly. And it can look pretty visually impressive at times, but what gets me going a little bit crazy about it, unlike some other games that would really benefit from having a dynamic lighting system, like say for example, Stalker 2, it was made by a relatively small team out of Ukraine, which I think they moved when the war happened. But this game is Unreal Engine 5. It does run like shit. The RTX 4060 absolutely struggles in this game, even at medium settings at 1080p. It is not really a good look. It does make a little bit sense to be in UE5. One, because it's a relatively small team, just like Black Myth Wukong, but Stalker 2 also has a dynamic lighting system. Like, it has a day-night cycle and everything. It has areas that you'd be exploring with different light sources, and it makes sense to have a dynamic lighting system in the game, at least a little bit more. Now, there's a bunch of issues with it, like I don't even think Lumen looks that good in Stalker 2 because the reflections don't look that sharp, because the environments have like a bunch of light bleed and everything. But at the same time, I get why they would use UE5 for this game, even if it is so demanding. That doesn't mean people are going to want to play it though, because it's very freaking hard to run on your system. That isn't a very good experience for most people. Which gets me even more confused about Black Myth Wukong. It doesn't really need to have a fully dynamic lighting system in the game. Yeah, it could make it look better in certain scenarios, but Black Myth Wukong is so hard to run because it's using Nanite and Lumen within the game, and it doesn't really need it. The entire environment stays the same. They could bake all the lights in this environment and have it run absolutely great. That's also not to say that you can't get Nanite and Lumen running pretty well in your game as well. Like if we hop over to Expedition 33, this game doesn't have the best mesh detail or the best textures in a game ever, but this was also made by a relatively small team, which is cool because Unreal Engine allows a lot of dev studios to do this. But unlike a lot of the other games, Expedition 33 isn't that bad to run. It feels like what would be a modern game where it's like pretty demanding. It looks pretty good with the dynamic Lumen lighting system and stuff, but you can also play with just a little bit of upscaling at 1440p on a 3060 and still get like over 60 FPS. So you can get games running well in Unreal Engine as long as you work to optimize it. Yet Wukong runs really, really poorly.
You I've seen you.
Just like the Oblivion Remaster. This game was very heavily praised, and I'm probably going to ruin your nostalgia a bit here, because when I was playing on the RTX 3060, I was thinking that the experience is actually pretty good, because you go through this cave section at the beginning. The 3060 was handling it at like almost 60 FPS, even being upscaled to 4K. I was like, okay, this is running pretty well, even though it's Unreal Engine 5. Like, huh, maybe they figured out how to make this game run well. What the hell is that thing, bro? That's what happened. So like it was like pretty fine performance, and then it got really rough. We dropped into the 30s of frames and it fell the fuck apart. And I had to scale back the graphics very, very heavily. I had to drop to medium settings. I had to go to 1080p at native 1080p, and it still couldn't even achieve 60 FPS on this graphics card. So you pretty much have to use upscaling even on the most popular graphics card in the world, which is the RTX 3060, which basically means that this is the recommended way to play the game, because this is what most people have. So they want you to use upscaling at 1080p. And that's the thing, if you were to think like, oh, you could just switch it to low settings in the game and get away with that. No, low settings look awful, and I wouldn't recommend anybody play on low settings for this game. So Oblivion Remastered kind of falls into this trap. The Unreal Engine is a huge visual uplift from what the old game did. But if you were to look at the old game, I don't even think I have to show you this, but you could probably run that at 2 billion FPS. Oblivion Remaster still has the old creation engine underneath it. So what they basically did is they nested the creation engine inside of the Unreal Engine 5, and then the Unreal Engine is doing all of the different effects within the game, the visual effects, the new assets, the lighting, but then the old game is still right beneath it, which makes it pretty cool because you can still have a faithful recreation of the old game. But now you're going through basically two engines. Unreal Engine 5 is already very hard to run, and I don't know where some of these visual problems can come from. But what I find interesting, there are some major issues with how this game looks. For example, I just have my sword here by this little lake. My sword is like reprojecting a reflection inside of the lake, which makes no physical sense whatsoever. Why is my sword reflecting like that all over the lake? It doesn't even have lumen reflections in the game. How these work, it's reprojecting some things you see on your screen onto the reflection of the water. And because of how the creation engine is built, and you can kind of like zoom out your character, so you can go into third person or go back into first person in these type of games. So your character, at least from what I'm assuming why this visual bug happens, since your character's always loaded into Oblivion Remaster, that's going to make these weird issues with the screen space reflections or any other screen space lighting effect or anything really. That's just another example of a game that can fall into the Unreal Engine, I guess, trap. Now let's quickly hop over to another ray tracing required game, and that is AC Shadows, or Assassin's Creed Shadows, or Assassin's Creed Shadows. I don't know why I have so many names for this game. And if you were to hop on the RX 6700, which is basically the same GPU that's in the PS5, this does have ray tracing on it, then you're going to barely be able to play this game in general. Because at 1080p with medium settings using the ray tracing everywhere, you're gonna be looking at the high 30s, maybe low 40s. Now you can restrict the ray tracing to only be used in your hideout within the game, and the rest of the game just uses some kind of basic GI. But this game really looks extremely different if you don't use ray tracing. So like ray tracing, I think, is pretty much required for this game. And if you turn it on this specific graphics card, then you're only getting in the high 30s for frames, which is just not a very good experience. And we hop over to the RTX 4060 in this game. I tried this at 1440p, but being scaled up from 720p, so DLSS performance. And we could get pretty close to 60 FPS, not quite 60. I did find some funny bugs. Look at this texture. So I'm on an 8GB graphics card right now, just kind of popping in and out of existence over and over again. You might want to say, well, we could just use frame generation to get over 60 FPS, and it didn't really help me in this game at all. The only way to get Assassin's Creed Shadows to run decently is when you have enough baseline performance to start using upscaling, it seems like. So if you hop over to like the RTX 4070, at 1440p, you only have to upscale a little bit, and you can get over like 70 FPS a lot of the time. Then you need to have higher performance so you don't have way too low res of an upscale for these games to make them look good. These are just some games that are having a lot of issues, and there's probably plenty more you can think of. Leave the worst optimized games in the comments below. And don't even mention all of the CPU related problems in these games now. It feels like it uses more of your CPU than it does your GPU, and your GPU almost doesn't matter anymore. but I'll probably leave that for an upcoming video. But that really brings me down to the crux of optimization. You know, optimization is not like, oh, I can run a bajillion FPS, but the game looks like a worse version of Minecraft. It's not that. What optimization is finding the best balance of visuals and performance, and then combining those to make an optimized game. You hop over to a lot of these games, and maybe except for like Assassin's Creed Shadows or something, but the level of visual fidelity that you're getting for the performance it's asking of your system just doesn't feel worth it at all. So it started to get me thinking, why are developers making games that look like this, that run like this? How is this becoming the norm that so many games are releasing in this state? I think the major reason for this, and almost every single game that we looked at has this as in some way, shape, or form, some type of real-time lighting for the dynamic environments. That's the major thing, and it's very, very performance taxing on your system. So we looked at Unreal Engine 5 games, which has Nanite and Lumen. There's also other games that require ray tracing in general, like Doom the Dark Ages and Assassin's Creed Shadows, that use the ray tracing for global illumination. And I think Monster Hunter Wilds uses some type of software-based ray tracing. I'm not even 100% sure on that, but to me, I just don't know how the game runs so shitty and doesn't even look that good. But the lighting is somewhat accurate. And the reason it seems like devs are using this real-time lighting system is because, one, it makes a more interactable environment for the player. So that's like a player-focused perspective. Yeah, you could do something like Overwatch 2 does, where you can still hit some things, but it doesn't really update the lighting and the surroundings, doesn't really make an impact as much as you might think. But you could be using like real-time lighting like Lumen, and then when you do move something, everything updates in real time. Then also another major benefit to using real-time lighting, when they're developing the game, it saves them a lot of time because they don't have to go through and bake lights or optimize environments nearly as much. You go into something like Unreal Engine, and it uses Nanite for the LODs. So instead of using levels of details, which you have to pre-make these objects in order to make them run more optimized as they get farther away from you, Nanite does that on its own. And certain systems like with Witcher 4 and CDPR are making Nanite run more efficiently. So we'll see where that goes into the future. But then you combine that with Lumen, which is a real-time lighting system, and it almost feels like Unreal Engine is something that you can just place objects into an environment and it's just going to kind of figure everything out for you, which isn't the case at all. You can make Unreal Engine 5 games run so much smoother than they do, but at least on the surface, it can kind of accomplish like a drag and drop thing for developers, which makes development a lot faster and a lot cheaper. So I get why developers would want to use a real-time lighting system, and honestly, I think it looks good if they can present it properly. And everything with these real-time lighting effects runs so much worse than their counterparts in the industry that don't use that type of thing. And we also see in many games, like, yeah, this real-time lighting on the surface has a lot of benefits, but also can look worse in certain situations because it's actually a lower resolution that we're trying to make up. I do want to say that there is examples of real-time lighting being used pretty damn well. Obviously, there's been systems for years that use day-night cycles and everything, so that's been somewhat worked around. Not even sure of all the intricacies of those systems, but a recent game like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 did use a software ray tracing system for the lighting, surprisingly, and it ran pretty well. So like that game looks pretty damn good. I would call Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 an optimized title because it hits a really nice balance of this real-time lighting while not having that many visual compromises. They did an amazing job on this, and it's an open world game as well. And Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was built on the Cry engine. Yes, the same engine that made Crysis 3. You know things are bad when nowadays that engine runs much better than the other engines that other studios have made. Yeah, not really a great look there, but Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is an absolutely awesomely optimized game. Honestly, you see my dog back there? She's making noises. Oh, she's about to get down. So like, I'm bored. Obviously, our hardware hasn't really been advancing that much every generation. This applies to consoles too, but like every generation, we're not getting more and more powerful hardware. But at the same time, the developers who are making these games should also be making the games for what is available right now. If you see things on the Steam hardware survey, I mean, that's what people have, you know? So you just have to make games for what people have. So it's very disappointing to see in so many games how unoptimized it is. And it's also very refreshing when you see games run extremely well. Stellar Blade. This is also an Unreal Engine game. It's built in Unreal Engine 4, not 5. And it's because in 4, they're using a lot of the baked lighting effects that were already a thing. but in the past that ran so much better. And if you're gonna sit here and tell me a Stellar Blade, I'm not talking about the protagonist, looks very good, it graphically still looks very good, and you can run this game on an RTX 4060 at native 1440p on high settings and get like over 60 FPS and run completely fine. This is the type of graphical level that I would think we'd still be at. Now, the only problem that Stellar Blade really has, and I don't really blame them to be honest, but the game wants more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and a lot of graphics cards that are very popular have 8 gigabytes of VRAM. So if you want to play at high settings, even medium settings, it really does push 8 gigabytes and you don't get a very smooth experience. That's where you talk to the hardware manufacturers, because we've been on 8 gigabyte GPUs since 2017 or 2016, since these have been mainstream. So I don't really blame them for pushing 8 gigabytes. Now, another game I mentioned earlier that does run well is Expedition 33, and that's also an Unreal Engine 5 game that uses Nanite and Lumen as far as I can tell. And honestly, that game still looks pretty damn good. It has some visual issues, like some of the post-processing effects I think are pretty low resolution, and the environment detail is not amazing, but they made a really good compromise of what the game looks like versus how much performance does it take on your system. So obviously in Unreal Engine 5, it can be done. And I think they did a good balance here. And the last game I want to mention that's pretty well optimized, and this one might surprise you, but it is Cyberpunk. I'm not gonna lie, raster lighting in this game looks good. You don't need all of the ray tracing like hullabaloo that's in the game. You don't really need it. These are just some of the games that I want to point specifically towards that I see it hit a really nice balance of visual fidelity and the performance it takes on your system. They are well optimized titles. Why not make your game more accessible and make it run on more systems? But that's about where I'm at it. So many games releasing right now run like absolute shit, and I really wish it wasn't like that. I wish we saw more games that you could play on reasonable hardware at 1440p, which is a very reasonable and affordable resolution. But instead, nowadays, we're just like, oh, we're gonna upscale just to achieve 1080p gaming performance. Like, that is just fucking stupid. So if this does change in the future as developers maybe start to wake up to like, hey, maybe we could make games run a little bit better than they are, like maybe prioritize the gameplay within your video game. Maybe I'm just too entitled for this. It's not like they can make it happen with Unreal Engine 4. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are there any games in particular that run super well or super bad that you want to point out? I just named a few in this video that I actually also did research for. But that's been it for me. I'm gonna go ahead and see you guys in the next video. Y'all have a good one, and peace.